Hayes. At first glance it might seem like just another West London suburb, a place you pass through on the Elizabeth line, or maybe where you've parked your car before catching a flight from Heathrow. But hidden behind the modern shopping centres, the roundabouts and the railway platforms is a town with a story that stretches back almost 1,000 years. This is a place where medieval farmers once worked the land, where world-changing music was pressed onto vinyl, where George Orwell drew inspiration, and where whole generations built new lives under the shadow of Heathrow's runways. So, join me on this journey, a stroll through the streets, fields and factories of Hayes. And as we walk, keep in mind, every ordinary looking corner here has a story to tell. Let's wind the clock back to the 11th century. Hayes appears in the Domesday Book of 1086, that giant survey William the Conqueror ordered like a medieval census. Back then, Hayes was little more than farmland, with a scattering of cottages and fields edged by hedgerows. If you picture it now, imagine farmers moving through the mist at dawn, leading oxen to plough the heavy clay soil, or villagers gathering at the simple wooden church that would later become St Mary's. Parts of that church, tucked away off the busy Uxbridge Road, still date back to the 12th century. Life here would have been tough but steady. Sheep grazing, crops harvested by hand, local fairs bringing people together. The pace of life in medieval Hayes couldn't be more different from the rush of modern Hayes, but the roots are still there, under our feet. For centuries, Hayes remained a quiet farming village, but the 19th century changed everything. First came the Grand Union Canal, carving its way through the countryside, bringing barges piled with goods. Then came the Great Western Railway, steam trains hissing and roaring into the area. Hayes suddenly found itself connected, no longer a backwater, but part of London's expanding industrial belt. Imagine standing by the canal in the 1850s, narrowboats sliding past, loaded with coal and bricks, while smoke rises from new factories along the water. Or picture Victorian railway workers spilling out after a long shift, heading to crowded pubs that still echoed with the clatter of boots and laughter. Hayes was no longer just fields, it was becoming a town of workers, machines and movement. But before the record factories and before the roar of Heathrow, Hayes had another industry that quite literally built London: bricks. In the 1800s, Hayes sat on rich seams of London clay, perfect for brickmaking. As the city exploded in size during the Victorian era, there was an insatiable demand for bricks, and Hayes became one of the places that supplied them. Whole stretches of land around Botwell and Yeading were turned into brickfields. If you were walking through Hayes in the mid-19th century, you'd have seen rows of wooden sheds, kilns belching out smoke, and workers, men, women, even children, moulding bricks by hand. It was hot, back-breaking work. Imagine standing ankle deep in sticky clay on a summer's day, hands raw from shaping brick after brick, while the foreman shouted for faster output. The smoke from the kilns hung heavy in the air, coating everything in a grey film. Yet the pay was poor and the hours long. Many of the workers were migrants themselves, often Irish families who had arrived in London after the famine. They lived in makeshift huts beside the fields, scraping by day to day. One Victorian writer described the Hayes brickmakers as living in squalid huts upon the clay, a stark picture of poverty at the very edge of booming London. But despite the hardship, work of these brickmakers left a permanent mark. Countless houses, factories and railway arches across West London, perhaps even some you're walking past without noticing, were built with bricks fired in the kilns of Hayes. In a way, Hayes quite literally built the capital. And there's another legacy too. When the clay pits were exhausted, the land was left scarred with deep hollows. Many were later filled and built over, but the memory of those pits lingers in the shape of the land and in place names that echo back to the Brickfield era. So before Hayes pressed the records that defined modern music, it pressed clay into bricks that built Victorian London. And then, in the early 20th century, just as the brickfields were fading away, another industry arrived that would give Hayes a brand new identity: music. The opening of the gramophone company factory in 1907 transformed Hayes once again. In 1907, the gramophone company built a factory in Hayes. By 1931, it had become EMI, and from that point on, Hayes wasn't just part of London, it was part of the soundtrack of the world. This was the factory where vinyl records were pressed, millions upon millions of them. If you've ever had an old Beatles LP or maybe a Cliff Richard single, there's a good chance it was made right here in Hayes. Workers would clock in early, pull on overalls and spend long shifts by the record presses. You can almost hear it. The hiss of steam, the heavy thud of machines, the smell of hot vinyl. And out would come a shiny black disc, fresh off the press, ready to be shipped across the globe. The Beatles album Please Please Me rolled off these machines. Pink Floyd, Queen, the Rolling Stones. Their music wasn't just played in Hayes, it was manufactured here, in a town that quietly kept the world dancing. It's hard not to imagine a factory worker slipping a record into their bag at the end of a shift, taking it home and playing it for their family. Their living room filled with the same music that would echo through the stadiums worldwide. But Hayes hasn't just pressed the voices of others, it also shaped the lives of some remarkable people. Take George Orwell. Long before 1984 or Animal Farm, Orwell, or then Eric Blair as he was known, spent time teaching at a training college in Hayes. Walking around the factories and workshops of the area, he saw the contrast between industrial grind and human struggle. You can almost sense how these sights work their way into his later writing about society and power. Then there's Barry Foster, a name some might not immediately recognise, but if you ever watched the TV detective series Van der Valk in the 1970s, you will definitely remember him. He grew up in Hayes, long before stepping into the trench coat of the Amsterdam detective that made his name. For locals, there's always been a bit of pride in knowing one of the great British TV icons walked the same pavements as they did. And of course, Hayes has its champions, literally. The Finnegan brothers, Chris and Kevin, were both born and raised here. Chris went on to win Olympic gold for Britain in boxing at the 1968 Mexico Games. A moment of pure triumph that lifted the whole country, not just in Hayes. His brother Kevin was a top professional too, scraping his way through the middleweight division in the 1970s. Together they showed that Hayes could produce not just bricks and records, but also fighters with real grit and heart. And then, just to prove Hayes has a playful side too, we have Douglas Trendle, better known to the world as Buster Bloodvessel, the eccentric frontman of ska band Bad Manners. With his shaved head, giant tongue and madcap energy, he became a symbol of British pop fun in the 1980s. For a while he even lived on a canal houseboat here in Hayes, a perfectly quirky detail that somehow suits both him and the town. So, from glamorous Hollywood to the boxing ring, and from detective dramas to outrageous ska gigs, Hayes has quietly given the world more personalities than you might expect. Each of them carried a little bit of this place with them, in their own way. Of course, if you live in Hayes, you can't escape Heathrow. Just a stone's throw away, the airport has shaped the town since it first opened. From the 1950s onwards, waves of workers arrived in Hayes, drawn by jobs at Heathrow and the factories nearby. They came from across the UK, but also from India, Pakistan, the Caribbean, Africa, and then later Eastern Europe. You can imagine a family stepping off a plane in the 1960s, settling into Hayes and building a new life. The father working shifts at the airport, the mother perhaps in one of the factories, pressing records, and children growing up with both London accents and roots stretching back thousands of miles. This mix gave Hayes its character. Walk down Cold Harbour Lane or the town centre today and you'll see it. Indian sweet shops, Caribbean takeaways, Polish bakeries, Turkish cafes, all sitting alongside classic British pubs. Hayes is a mosaic of the world, and that mosaic grew out of Heathrow's shadow. Today, Hayes is firmly part of London's fabric, sitting in the borough of Hillingdon. With the Elizabeth line, you can reach central London in little more than 20 minutes, something unimaginable a century ago. The old EMI site, once filled with machines and music, has been reborn as the old vinyl factory. Walk through it now and you'll find modern apartments, cafes and creative spaces. But look closely and you'll still see nods to the past. Murals of vinyl records, names of legendary bands, reminders that this patch of Hayes once made the music of the world spin. Hayes today is busy, diverse and constantly changing. But if you pause and listen, you can almost hear it. The medieval church bell, the clatter of canal barges, the steam trains hissing, the thump of vinyl presses and the roar of jets overhead. All these layers, all these stories, that's the history of Hayes. So next time you're passing through Hayes, whether it's on a train, in a car or maybe even flying overhead, remember that this isn't just another London suburb, it's a place that helped feed medieval villages, drive the Industrial Revolution, press the records that define modern music and welcome communities from every corner of the globe. Hayes has always been more than it seems, and in many ways it's a mirror of London itself, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Thanks for joining me on this journey through Hayes. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more walks through London's history. and let me know in the comments, what's your Hayes story?